The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery. But the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and it is our pleasure to we have a couple of guys on for the first time. Mike and I are kind of happy about this. Jim Johnson, longtime coach, basketball coach, Greece Athena High School, 20 years, 6 sectionals. Jimmy, thanks for coming on with us.
My pleasure.
Mike Catalana. And Paul Gotham here from the Vision High School Sports Beat, and also PickensBlenders.com, sort of a basketball major at the high school level there.
Well, second to Jimmy over there.
Well, then we will defer to Jim. Jim, this is one of my favorite times of the year. Sectional basketball, and you get to the War Memorial and all the rest of the stuff, but it doesn't seem to me it's as big as it should be, or maybe as big as it once was. Where do you see high school basketball and how we respond to it on the scene right now?
Well, I think the sectional tournament is very well run in this area, but I don't think we get the fan support that at one time we did. There's certainly a lot of things people can do these days, but I've always kidded, because I coached in Greece for a long time and I grew up there, that if just 10% of my town came to the Blue Cross Arena, we would sell out, and that doesn't happen. So that's, it's kind of staggering from that perspective.
And I think even at Athena, I think it's kind of on the small side, because I go to some games at Athena, and I'm really surprised at how small some of those crowds for some great games are.
Absolutely. In fact, I kidded my last 3 years at Athena. We were 66-5. We lost no home games, and we sometimes I was often kidded with people that if I was a Division I college coach, they'd have fired me for lack of attendance. So it's disappointing because they really have had a great run there and some really quality basketball, and it's too bad that more people aren't coming to see it.
Yeah, I think it's disappointing, and I put some of this on the students, other students who aren't there. At some places, it becomes a thing, which I think is great, and there are students who put it upon themselves to say, I'm going to be like the leader, and they attempt to get kids. Look, there's a lot of sports. It's not just basketball, but where they're supporting the hockey team or the girls basketball team or whatever it happens to be. But I see a little. I don't even know if apathy is the right word, but it's like you go and you think to yourself, where are all the kids? Why aren't they supporting their classmates, especially when we get to this point? Like, what else is going on that is so important? Because even if it's a Friday night or a Saturday night, I mean, let's be honest, the game is, 7:30, whatever it is, the game's over by, I mean, you still have a life beyond that, even at that age. And I would like to see more of that. Some schools get it, and we'll see it at the War Memorial. Some schools, and there's moments, but I'd like to see a little more from the students themselves.
There was a little anticipation was lost when Jonathan Williams and Isaiah Stewart went away to prep schools. And I think that took a little bit of the luster off during the preseason. But I think people are starting to figure out now. We have several very good players in the area, maybe not at Isaiah Stewart and Jonathan Williams level, but we certainly have a bunch of players, and they're going to find that out in the coming weeks here.
Now, we had talked on the Sports Beat about how successful the Rainbow Classic was, and how that seemed to be, it's Pittsford, and it's coming all the way into town for a neutral location. They sell it out weeks in advance. We're like an event-oriented town, I think.
And it's driven by the school district. It's driven by the athletic department, and they really drum up support for that weeks in advance. And that's been going on for how many years now? So it's had that effect over several years, and you see what happens with it.
Can we do anything to help make it better? Is there something missing in your eyes?
You know what? I wish I had the answer. I do agree with Mike that I think one time I saw a lot more student involvement in high school athletics, and I don't see it as much. And I think if the students got more involved, then it would really boost what's going on, the spirit of the school.
And there are pockets, because we see Fairport, McQuaid, and Schrader come to mind that have big student support sections.
Yeah, and it depends. Sometimes maybe it depends on the sport. To Paul's point, regular sports fans, You want to see a kid like Isaiah or Janathan play. I don't think that should really impact within the school itself because it's still your classmates and it is highly competitive. I mean, you look at some of the classifications. I mean, you know, from the 1 seed to the 6 seed. I mean, it is wide open in that way. But to see the great players, to see the players who are going to that next level, I would hope that would get the regular sports fan who's going to say, hey, I want to watch this kid play.
This is the Rochester Press Box, brought to you by the Genesee Brewhouse. We'll talk Buffalo Bills next. The Press Box, brought to you in part by Connors and Ferris, your workers' comp attorneys. Call 262-COMP, C-O-M-P, today. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and this portion is brought to you by Connors and Ferris. We talk Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Someone floated this report that the Bills and the Giants were talking.
Yeah.
Probably nothing to it, but it does bring the question is this, if the Bills, and we're all talking about quarterbacks,
right,
how much is too much to attempt to move up without sacrificing the plan?
Well, I think any plan that you have has to involve getting a quarterback, and you got to figure out a way to do it. And I would say the Bills have never been all in on getting a quarterback. They really haven't been. You go back to Jim Kelly, and they drafted him and then eventually got him back. But since that point in time, have they ever been? Yeah, they drafted J.P. Lossman and E.J. Manuel as almost afterthoughts in the first round. Neither guy considered a first rounder. They haven't gone out and gotten the big name when it's usually not available. Drew Bledsoe would have been the closest thing. They traded a number 1 for him. I think the time has come to go all out and get the guy and then build around it. Everybody always says, you know, how many picks you give up. You know what? Look at Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. You do the right thing in free agency. You don't overpay. You get 2 really good players. If Brandon Beane can do that and use some picks and use the other ones for currency to move up to get the guy you want, I say this is the year they need to do it.
Jimmy, I know you've been paying close attention to kind of like where they're headed and stuff. I've heard people call the most important draft the Bills have had in some 20 years anyway. I mean, is it that important?
I definitely think it is. It's so huge because I think the scary thing, you know, being a Bills fan and the drought they went through is the fact that they made the playoffs and now people think they're there and they're not. I mean, they have a lot of holes and the biggest hole is the quarterback. They have to find a quarterback for their team for the next decade. And if that doesn't happen, I could see this team plummeting. And I hope that doesn't be the case because we went through such a long drought, but I'm scared about that.
You see it the same way? Is this the year that has to be the year?
Well, and as Jimmy was talking before about LaShawn McCoy, I mean, he's at the end of his career as being productive for a long time. So, yeah, if they're going to do something with his level in the backfield, they gotta make things happen now, right?
I want to be 29 years old at the end of my career.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I mean, it's a different world that they live in, you know, and there was rumors floating out there about trading McCoy. Yeah, sure that could happen. I think that's to free up cap space. I think that's to go cheaper at running back and maybe make other plans. But in terms of what they need to do, they do have a lot of holes to fill. You could sit back and say, man, we got 2 number 1s, we got this extra pick, we can do that. Fill all those holes. If you don't have the guy behind center, you're not winning. And look,
are you convinced these guys think that way? I mean,
yes.
Could they throw us all a curveball and not draft a quarterback with a first-round pick?
Oh, yeah, it could be. Look, if they are in their minds, they're sitting there saying, we think, you know, a Mason Rudolph or somebody who's maybe not considered a first rounder or maybe not going, but maybe, you know, they have 2 number 1s. Maybe one of those picks late in the first round is who they want to take. Sure, that's the case. Brandon Beane, everybody focuses a lot on McDermott. Brandon Beane is an aggressive guy. I think he has a plan. He was in Carolina and saw it work. They ended up getting the number 1 pick. Pluses and minuses on Cam Newton. They went to a Super Bowl with the guy. He is still a superior player in the NFL. I think they believe they have to get that guy. And I think at some point, you're going to buy in, you're going to trade up, you're going to do what it takes to get the guy. And I think this is the year they do it.
This is the Rochester Press Box. We are presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Buffalo Bills portion brought to you by Connors and Ferris. Like it or not, it's next. Here's the Press Box trivia question brought to you by Market View Liquor. where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Here's the Press Box Trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Welcome back. It's the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. This is Like It or Not. Jimmy, like it or not, the Red Sox signed J.D. Martinez. Red Sox and the Yankees are back at rivals.
Yeah. You know, it's going to be interesting. I'm a Yankee fan, so I certainly with them picking up Giancarlo. But, you know, I do have two concerns with the Yankees. Number one is still some questionable pitching because CeCe had a year they didn't expect, and now is he going to come back? And they have some other question marks on their staff. And then the other thing I'm concerned is their lineup has become so power-oriented that those guys tend to go into funks, and if they all go into a funk together, they won't score a lot of runs.
All right, you want to present the other side of this?
The discussion, we do have two first-year managers, right? And one of those managers has been in the booth for how many years, and the other guy's been in a dugout. What difference, and Jimmy, you're the coaching guru. I mean, what difference is Cora going to have giving an advantage to the Red Sox over Boone with the Yankees? And I know I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses. I think Cora's going to do well with it.
The only thing I would say about that is a basketball coach makes 500 decisions before a baseball manager sits up in the dugout, especially in the American League. I mean, let's face it, Boone's job is to keep the personalities together, to keep the attitude there. You know, some pitching decisions, but he's got a pitching coach. For the most part, write up that lineup card, hand it in, and go sit down. And I think that's the difference. It's the difference in the sports. That doesn't mean Cora's not going to do great. Like, I don't know. But I think there's just very little decision-making made in a baseball
It's a wheelhouse.
manager.
Baseball's a lot easier, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
Mike, like it or not, this whole practice, the NCAA, in terms of vacating victories, and we saw it with Syracuse, and they slapped Louisville pretty tough this week.
Yeah, I mean, taking away a title, the banner coming down and all, that is a pretty big deal in the sense of taking away the identity for that. I hate the whole vacate. I mean, I was at that Final Four. I was at the game. I watched them win. Louisville won the game. So in the sense of taking it away, yeah, that is your punishment. The players on the court won. They feel like they won. So in that case, I don't think you're really punishing them in that way. I don't know how much of a deterrent that is to most schools, depending on what they're going to do. But Louisville was there was so much going on there. And they keep fighting it like it wasn't the case. But the actual taking away the wins, I think Jim Boeheim should get his wins back. I think it's almost silly to take them away like that's the punishment. But that's the NCAA for you, though. They like the idea of doing something more than the practical end of it.
Paul, I thought Syracuse was the classic example of what Mike's talking about in terms of what really hurt them was a scholarship loss. And if the NCAA wants to punish a program and not the kids that are playing, I mean, we saw what's happened to Syracuse this year. Maybe that's the way to go.
Well, did it really hurt them? Because they're not SMU football from the 80s, right? I mean, they're still up and around.
Have you seen them play?
Yeah. Right. But they're still, well, now they're being talked about as being in the possibility of being in the NCAA tournament. So I don't think it's that much of a drop-off for them in comparison, again, to SMU. But the interesting thing is that the NCAA takes away the victories, but the teams that they played, they still have the losses. They still
the ones they lost. That's right.
So those games now are out there in the ether somehow, and they didn't really happen. And back to your point, they did happen. People were there, and everybody knows who won and lost those games.
Is this vacated thing, does it accomplish anything, do you think, Jimmy?
I don't, other than it does, I'm sure there's a little issue with the school that, losing an NCAA tournament or championship. The interesting perspective, I'm going to take just a little different angle. I was a huge Rick Pitino fan early in my career. And the scary thing, I think, in college athletics right now is to say that what's coming out looks like they cheated quite a bit. And I'm thinking, if Rick Pitino, a Hall of Fame coach, that has all kinds of the best facilities in America, if they're cheating, how many other schools? It's kind of frightening to me.
Yeah, and Louisville isn't, this isn't the FBI thing for Louisville either.
That could be
This all preceded that.
Right, yeah.
So there's no telling how bad this is going to get.
Right.
This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business is next.
How we doing? Got the usuals.
The usuals.
The usual?
You know it.
Your usual.
Cream and sugar, caramel.
Large dice.
At Dunkin' Donuts, we'll make sure it's just the way you like it every time. America runs on Dunkin'.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Paul, why don't you start?
Take us to the NBA. We haven't talked about that too much yet. Everybody's talking about all the drama in the Eastern Conference, but you look over in the Western Conference, Golden State is still near the top. Steph Curry is still near the top of scoring and everything. And nothing warms my heart more than to walk into a high school gymnasium and seeing young basketball players mimicking Steph Curry and his ball handling. The three-pointer, I'll leave aside, but mimicking his ball handling efforts and trying to develop balance of hands, it's really nice to see. But here's another thing with Steph Curry. He went to Davidson College because nobody else wanted him. And he led Davidson College to the NCAA tournament, to the Elite Eight, where they were within a whisper of beating Kansas in his sophomore year. And what did he do? He returned for his junior year. Sometimes it's not about going and get a bigger stage. Sometimes just making the most out of your role. Follow Steph Curry's lead with that.
Yeah, he's such a star now. We don't think of Steph Curry still as being an underdog story, but he really was coming out.
He really was, and it's great to see. He's changed the game. He's changed the game, and I think in the way that he's extended the court and also putting in a guy, he's considered a point guard. He's considered a point guard. He was not a point guard at Davidson. He was a shooting guard. But he's become a scoring point guard.
Are we seeing the trickle-down effect already from him at the high school level, do you think?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other way he should change things is, if you remember, when Curry first came into the NBA, struggled with injuries, struggled with his shot, wasn't the guy. In our Twitter world now, he'd have been labeled a bust and buried, even though it's only been a few years, and with a little patience and a little time and health in his case, he became more of a player than I think anybody would have anticipated.
Jim, what do you got for us?
Well, being a longtime high school coach, and now I travel the country doing speeches, I talk a lot about leadership, and I want to challenge three groups today. First with the coaches, and one of the leadership traits I talk about is leading by example. So I want to challenge it because I think the microcosm of sports starts at the high school level, and I really challenge all our coaches, and I think there's so many tremendous coaches in Section 5 to continue to lead by example. Then secondly, our players taking up on that. Remember, there are a lot of young people looking at you and how you exhibit yourself, whether it's on the court or on the field or wherever, is so powerful. And I always told our players, you're always on stage. And then thirdly, a real challenge now in the coaching profession is working with the parents. And I think as parents, we have to do a better job of leading by example and showing our children, because there are going to be a lot of highs and lows in athletics. And I gave my team a quote every day, and I want to share this with all the parents. And it says, live so that when your children think of fairness and integrity, they think of you. Thanks.
Very nice, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. All right, we talked a little bit about the Bills and the NFL, and I'm going to the Combine. Toby Matika and I are going there, and people think of the Combine, many of you do, as you see the guys running sprints and throwing on the field and all. That's not why we go, and I'm going to tell you that's not why the teams go. Yeah, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane will be there, and this is their opportunity to really get to know the college players. They get opportunities to sit with them in a room, interview them, talk to them, and that's what they're going to be doing for quarterbacks. Sure, they want to see how the guy throws. They'll get plenty of opportunities. They'll watch his film. They want to get to know the player. This is where it will happen. This is where I believe Brandon Beane is going to zero in on a guy that he wants to be the next quarterback for the team. Can he make the moves? Can he move him up? Can he get him in a spot to take that guy? Whether it's Mayfield, whether it's Rosen, whether it's Darnold, who knows who they really like? But this is where they start to find out who makes the best match between coach and quarterback, because that's what works in the NFL.
God, it is so big. You know?
It is.
This
It's
is the
huge
beginning
for them.
of so big.
At some point, they're going to have to settle on somebody, and I tell you, I think this is the year they do it.
All right, Mike, thank you very much.
Yep.
Unfinished Business brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Jimmy, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
We loved having you.
Yeah, it's
Same with
great to
Paul.
be here.
Mike, as always, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week at the Rochester Press Box.